According to LUMA, we've had more billion-dollar ad tech acquisitions in the first quarter of 2021 than in the previous several years combined. What's going on? Could it be talk of third-party cookie deprecation, maybe the reality of IDFA apocalypse, new levels of competition, or maybe changing marketing channels and opportunities? Or is it just a new emphasis on platform and services and first-party data? We're going to find out. Vungle has been a big part of this acquisition frenzy and has acquired 4 companies in the last 9 months alone, including most recently JetFuel, an influencer marketing platform. And today we're chatting with Vungle's SVP of Revenue, Scott Silverman. Welcome, Scott.
Nice to be here, John.
Hey, super happy to have you here. Vungle's done a ton of acquisitions lately. What's changed in the market? What's driving this?
Yeah, great question. The acquisitions you're seeing now, they really kind of reflect our strategy that began back in 2019 when Blackstone first made its acquisition of Vungle. Our acquisition strategy really has been kind of focused on adapting our business to a changing marketplace, but our vision is still the same: to help developers address their app growth cycle. And that can be from game design to development to marketing, measurement, and beyond. So far, like you mentioned, we've actually closed 3 acquisitions. The JetFuel deal we announced a few weeks ago. Our first 3 acquisitions were largely what I would call thematic in nature. They kind of solve core adjacent problems to app development. That could be user acquisition or monetization. The first deal we did was Algolift. That was back in October of 2020. Basically, Algolift is a platform that is meant to help marketers determine the lifetime value of the users they're acquiring and automate their acquisition of new users based on those calculations. And then from there, we went on to buy a company called Game Refinery, which really helps app developers identify basically it's a research product that provides insight into what users want to see within games and how advertising performs within those game experiences. And then just recently, we announced the closing of TraceSenso, which is a creative builder technology that helps marketers basically create ads that they can run, wherever throughout the mobile app ecosystem.
Right. And now you've got JetFuel, and we'll get into what that is, what that looks like, what that company does, and how that's going to fit in your whole suite of products. But it's quite interesting because anybody who's been paying attention to the landscape lately, over the past few years, there's been a profusion of logos, right? I mean, logo explosion. You've seen Scott Brinker's marketing tech landscape, and ad tech has been very similar. Now we're seeing this consolidation. What's driving that? Are mobile advertisers' needs changing, or is it the environment that's changing?
I think it's a combination of both. I think there is increasingly mobile marketers are looking to consolidate themselves and find more one-stop shops that can service all of their needs. That's certainly kind of one of the theses that we have in our acquisition. How can we better service those customers on a more holistic basis? And JetFuel fits right into that. Basically, how can we help them acquire users where those users live? So I think that has been part of the consolidation. I also think, the market is becoming increasingly complex. And so, consolidating in that environment helps solve some of these tough problems, like you talked about, the cookie apocalypse or iOS 14.5 and things like that. So, I think that having some level of scale helps give marketers confidence that the partners they're working with are invested and capable of solving the tough problems that they face.
hmm One of the things that I help Singular with is the ROI index. And when I look at sort of the competitive landscape in mobile marketing, you see Facebook and Google, right? Massive giants. you see some of the second tier SANs, self-attributing networks, the Snaps and Twitters and Pinterest and stuff like that, along with kind of the top tier of large ad networks. And then you see literally thousands of others. How do you see the competitive landscape, and where does Vungle fit in that?
That's a great question. I mean, and there's no question that mobile marketing is a competitive space. We certainly view Vungle as having a really unique position in the market. Our CEO Jeremy often likes to use the phrase that we're providing app developers the picks and shovels for what you might consider like the mobile gold rush, so to speak. And so, we partner with those advertisers and marketers to help them build more effective products, reach their users more. We have the scale to do that. A genuine question we ask ourselves basically every day is what problems are adjacent to user acquisition and monetization that developers need to solve in order to grow their business. And I do think we're uniquely positioned to help them do that. Our recent acquisitions, kind of alongside Vungle's core legacy business, just reinforce that. It reinforces the pattern that we've got a broader capability to help them, whether that's in refining the game experience so that users really have like a delightful experience and stay and use that game more frequently, whether it's acquire more users and acquire those users more effectively. And then JetFuel kind of expands that to be able to acquire users, basically acquire Gen Z users in the manner that they're most accustomed to engaging with content, which is through social media.
That's a great segue, because JetFuel is a massive bet on influencer marketing. Maybe give us a bit of an overview of JetFuel, and then talk about the acquisition, the rationale behind that acquisition.
Yeah, absolutely. Even before I get into JetFuel, I mean, our thesis was we looked at the influencer space in general and just saw the explosive growth. I think that the stats are that there's going to be about $14 billion worth of spend in influencer marketing this year, and that's up from less than 2 billion just a few years ago.
That's
Uh,
huge.
yeah, so we saw the explosive growth, and then we thought about how could we take advantage of that. And JetFuel was just a natural extension of what we do. And I say that because JetFuel's basically built a platform to facilitate influencer marketing. The biggest challenges in that space historically has been that it just doesn't scale.
Mhm.
You had to contact one influencer after another individually, negotiate rates, and the platform JetFuel put together was just kind of the perfect answer for that. And it also complements the approach that we take with advertising today. Like Vungle is very performance oriented and JetFuel is very performance oriented. So, it was, I use the term natural, but it's a natural extension of what we do with advertisers today, but going after more of that Gen Z demographic that maybe is playing, is using apps less frequently, but is on TikTok and Snap and Instagram, hourly or daily.
Well, it's really interesting, right? I mean, that has been the traditional knock on influencer marketing, right? I mean, how do you scale it? Unless you're going with a Kardashian or something like that and spending, I don't know, millions and millions and millions of dollars for one influencer, it's this one off, one off, one off. The interesting thing about JetFuel, and I'm just looking at your press release right now, 15,000 fully verified influencers with a combined reach of over 4 billion Instagram followers, 1.5 billion TikTok followers, and 100 million daily Snapchat views. That's not small.
No,
That's significant scale.
yeah, John, you said it better than I did. Like, the idea is that uh, they platformize the ability to reach a significant number of influencers in a scalable way. So you can set your campaign up on their platform. You can reach 15,000 influencers that can opt in to take your campaign and present it to their followers. They have specifics around like creative license around that, but there's a whole approval process that those creators work with the advertisers to make sure they're presenting content that's both favorable for the advertisers and marketers, but also matches the voice that they have with their followers and the whole reason why they have such a strong influence over kind of the users that are interested in the content they normally produce. And doing all that in more of an automated fashion, combining that with a performance orientation. So everything JetFuel does is focused on how the campaign performs. There's some kind of call to action in the creatives that could be download an app, that could be perform some kind of action. And ultimately, the creators are compensated in that same fashion. So creators are compensated based on the performance of the ads themselves. So they're highly motivated to create content that's relevant for their users and to pick campaigns that they think will resonate well.
What's interesting for me here, seeing the ability to scale marketing via influencer marketing, recently talked to a marketing executive for direct to consumer for Clorox, and she had a phrase that I liked, which was surround sound marketing, which was she wanted to blanket her audience from all directions. I mean, not overwhelm, right? But if you went on the web, you found it. If you went on mobile, you found it. You went on social, you found it. And so there was this surround sound effect of this brand is everywhere. And if you wanted to do that in mobile marketing in the past, you could do that on paid. You could do that maybe with rewarded video. You could do that with, banners and stuff like that. It was really hard to do that with influencers. But now, if you have the budget, you can have your message pretty sure you're going to get to just about everybody multiple ways, multiple times. That's impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a big believer that when you run campaigns, you need to meet your demographic where they live, right? And so, especially in this day and age, being able to blanket that demographic in the spots that they're, most frequently consuming content is extremely important. And I think we've learned in the pandemic that just running maybe traditional TV advertising or something like that is not sufficient. Well, I guess we'd learned that long before the pandemic, but that's certainly not sufficient. And so blanketing those consumers to get your message out is great. And then what we're really big on is then combining that with the ability to measure campaign performance, optimize those campaigns, and JetFuel fits exactly in that same light. They're very focused on performance of the campaigns. They're the only influencer marketing that's actually recognized by Apps Flyer for how the campaigns perform in delivering ROAS for advertisers.
Interesting. Interesting. How does that marketing measurement change? How has that changed and how will that change? We know third-party cookies have been given a reprieve. We know IDFA is, for all intents and purposes, gone for most of your app installers. We feel like the Android app ID, the Google ad ID, is probably following at some point, maybe around the same time frame as third-party cookies, maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later. What does that look like in terms of marketing measurement now? You said it's very measurable. How is that happening?
Are you asking how's it happening on the JetFuel influencer side?
Yes.
Well, what's interesting about JetFuel is that the IDFA or the device ID is never a component for attribution for them. If you think about the way influencer marketing works, we're basically relying on these content creators to post messages on their own TikTok or Snap or Instagram pages. And in those cases, we don't know the device IDs of the people that are consuming that content. And so we're really leveraging the same infrastructure to track performance on a click-through basis that has been kind of time tested outside of a typical device ID attribution model.
Mm-hmm.
And so like a lot of those problems with iOS 14.5 as an example just don't really apply heavily in the JetFuel economy. But even if they do, this is actually part of our strategy. Like our acquisition of Algolith back in October of 2020 is actually set up to automate the attribution and optimization of campaigns independent of whether there's specific like identifiers of users. So we
Hmm.
do true probabilistic attribution of campaigns across all channels. You know, that could be spend on Vungle, that could be spend on Facebook. And then we use that to try and make automated recommendations for where marketers ought to be allocating their budget. And
Hmm.
leveraging that technology is part of the synergies that we expect to get with JetFuel. So we plan on applying those same kind of synergies that we have with Algolift in our core business across the JetFuel influencer marketing space.
Excellent. So that sounds like it's a combination of sort of web-based measurement as well as almost incrementality in some sense, algorithm-based, probabilistic, what's going on, what's happening, what activity is being driven by this new marketing that you're putting in place. So has Vungle finished its acquisition spree, or is there more to come?
That's a good question. I don't have anything specific that I can disclose on this in a in this conversation, but I will say that we are actively looking at opportunities to continue to expand our purview and solve our app developers' problems. And you know, we take a very measured approach. We've been super active just in the last 9 months, acquiring 3 companies and announcing this JetFuel deal. I don't. There's no plan to slow down that. You know, if we find
Mhm.
something that we think is going to be the right fit for our company, our culture, and our vision, we'll continue the trajectory. But we're also, we have a great business just with what we have today. So there is no requirement that we go and kind of add and expand. We're going to do that opportunistically.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, of course, we've seen that in the past, right? We've seen that with some companies that were going public and needed to add some revenue, so they had to do an acquisition. I won't name any names, and I won't ask you any questions about that. But it has been interesting to see. Scott, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it.
No, this was great. I appreciate the conversation, John, and yeah, excited to participate.